The Jesse Blake Sports Report with Jesse Blake.
The NHL regular season is long. It has its peaks and its valleys. And one of the best peaks every single year is trade deadline season. And as we all transition out of four-nation face-off mode, we will transition right back into trade deadline mode. It happens on March 7th, so it's coming up real soon. It's going to happen real quick. And we've already had a lot of really good trades, but what if we had more? So that's why today, in anticipation of the trade deadline coming up, I have for you 5 maybe probable, but definitely ridiculous trades that I would love to see happen, but who knows if they'd actually happen, but maybe they could happen in some sort of alternate universe. Let's count it down from 5 to 1 on my best crazy trades that could happen this NHL trade deadline. We'll start at number 5, a pretty simple one, Trevor Zegras from the Anaheim Ducks moving, because, you know, there's always been word around Trevor Zegras about like Anaheim's not totally happy with him. He's underperformed in what we thought he could have been in his career so far. He's only 23, but maybe a change of scenery is best for Trevor Zegras. And I think the perfect trade partner for Trevor Zegras would be the Nashville Predators, who are run by Barry Trotz currently in terms of their hockey operations. And he's always got a bit of a trigger finger, and he's always willing to pull off trades like this. And I don't think it'd take much to get this done on Nashville's part. I could see them moving a first-round pick, a second-round pick, a third-round pick, similar to that Tampa deal that Tampa did many moons ago where they just traded kind of a whole draft class, and Gus Nyquist, who will be the one getting the salary cap all balanced on the Anaheim side, because if Anaheim moved Trevor Zegras just for the picks, they would be under the salary cap floor. So I'm sending back pending UFA Gus Nyquist, who's 35, making $3.15 million this season, and then, like I said, is a UFA back to Anaheim in exchange for Trevor Zegras, and that's it. So Nyquist, a first, a second, and a third for Zegras. And Zegras, if you're wondering, makes $5.75 million. He's also signed through next season, and then he is an RFA in the 26-27 offseason. So the summer of 26, he is an RFA, and he will require a new contract. So on the Nashville side of things, I outlined why Anaheim would do this in the hypothetical world. Zegras, change of scenery, underperforming. We want these new picks. We're still rebuilding. We're still a ways away. Maybe we flip these picks down the road to get something else. But right now, recoup the assets on Zegras, whose stock might be trending downwards. Nashville side of it, hey, we're trying to win. Here's some young talent to ingest with our old talent that we signed last season. So you have Zegras now, which helps you down the middle where you've always been light. He can play center next to Stamkos, and then they'll have to find, I don't know, Zach LaRue on the other side maybe. But I think you found a future centerman where this team is light right now. Zegras to Nashville, trade number 1. Trade number 2. The Vegas Golden Knights must be involved in a big splash on trade deadline day. And what better splash than the trading for the guy who's already been traded? We've heard rumors that this might happen if they cannot sign him to a deal. Mikko Rantanen to the Las Vegas Golden Knights. Now, this one's a little trickier because it's difficult to figure out who's going back the other way. But I think I've created enough compensation to make this deal work. First of all, we're throwing in a third-round pick at the end of all this because you need the third-round pick in there just to make things a little nice and tidy for Carolina. They will also get Keegan Colasar, good depth piece, probably play on the fourth line. Victor Olofsson, who can play up in their lineup, and also he's a pending UFA as well, so you can re-sign him. You can cut ties at the end of the year if you really choose to. But like, there's a good piece that you can re-sign and keep around. You're going to acquire Olofsson in the Rantanen trade, and then the piece de resistance for the Carolina Hurricanes in this trade, Nick Hague. They get Nick Hague, who is a steady defenseman on the back end, who's going to be an RFA at the end of this year. So the idea is, from the Vegas perspective, we don't want to have to pay Nick Hague all this money. Carolina's going to have a whole bunch of money. He's 26. He's going to command a little bit of dough, higher than the 2.294 he's making right now. So we give Nick Hague in exchange for Rantanen, who's coming back the other way. No other pieces coming, leaving Carolina. So they're essentially adding 3 players who can play on their lineup tomorrow for Rantanen, and they get a 3rd-round pick. And essentially, this is what they get for Nichas and Drury in the end. You get Olofsson, Nick Hague, and Keegan Colasar, and a 3rd-round pick. Number 3 on my crazy fake trades for this trade deadline, we have to move a UFA who probably should get moved if this team trends downwards in the standings. But right now, they're treading water. They don't really need to move him, but there's no contract extension in place, so they might need to move him by the time March 7th comes around. And that is Brock Besser of the Vancouver Canucks, who does have a 10-team no-trade list. But let's hope that on his 10-team no-trade list isn't the Tampa Bay Lightning, who in this weird scenario, this fake scenario, I'd call it weird, but this fake scenario, this made-up scenario, Vancouver's sliding down the standings. They've lost every game out of the 4 nations, and they're like, okay, let's sell. They take back 2nd-round pick. They take that 2nd-round pick in 2025, like this upcoming draft. They get a 4th as well, and they're like, okay. Because Tampa's got those assets. You know how much they love not holding on to draft picks, and they have 2 seconds and 2 fourths. So they send 1 of each to Vancouver, and you're like, that's decent for a pending UFA, a 2nd and a 4th. But in this deal, we also have Mikey Easmont going the other way, who's making $800,000, is a UFA at the end of the year, as well as Nick Perbix, 26, making $1.125, going the other way as well. Also a UFA. So for Vancouver, you get 2 players who are UFAs but are 28 and 26. So you get to rebuild there a little bit. You get to probably re-sign them, keep them on the roster. Great middle depth pieces. Plus you get those picks. Plus you're selling off Besser, who's not coming back next year for that 2nd and that 4th. You get quite a haul for Besser from Tampa, and Tampa gets their forward where they can slide him in, probably where Easmont was or where Cam Atkinson is playing, somewhere on the right side there behind Kucherov. But it works perfectly for Tampa, and I think Vancouver will be happy with their little haul. At number 4, this could happen at the trade deadline, but honestly, this one's going down on the draft floor. That's the little asterisk on number 4, is that this is much more of a draft day trade than a trade deadline trade. And this one is Kirill Kaprizov and the Minnesota Wild breaking up. He says, I'm not signing here long-term. I'm a UFA at the end of next season, and I don't want to be here long-term. I want the sun and the moon, and you won't give it to me. So Minnesota Wild look at the situation, and they say, hey, a smart team is going to trade him and recoup the assets and move forward without you. And we're going to go knocking on the door of the Buffalo Sabres, who have exactly what we want in Dylan Cousins and JJ Peterka. And then if you really want, I would throw in Alex Tuck, but probably not. But probably maybe. Throw in Alex Tuck as well. Peterka, Tuck, and Cousins for Kirill Kaprizov. 3-for-1 blockbuster deal. Trade deadline, but really draft day floor. Kaprizov to Buffalo. They finally get some high-end talent that they know can perform at the NHL level. They move off of a couple young kids that you hope grow into a player like Kaprizov. And now the Minnesota Wild get some real depth in the forward group where you're stacked when you throw Peterka, Cousins, and Tuck into that 12-man. I think that's the move that's going to go down draft day. Lastly, number 5, the one that's going to shock the world and come out of nowhere, because there's all this talk about, Sidney Crosby needs to go play with his Nova Scotia friend Nathan McKinnon in Colorado, and Brad Marchand needs to join him. And where's Crosby going to play? He's going to play in Montreal, blah, 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 blah. What about Yevgeny Malkin? What if Malkin says, you know what? I've had fun here. Kyle Dubas, it's time to move me. And Malkin goes from the Pittsburgh Penguins to the Winnipeg Jets in exchange for Nick Ehlers. Sideways move for the Penguins, who are trying to contend as best they can. Nick Ehlers is a UFA at the end of this season. He's making $6 million right now. He needs a new contract. Why not in Pittsburgh, where they just moved off of their $6.1 million center who's aging right now. He's 38 years old and still signed through next year. But the Winnipeg Jets get a centerman where they are a little light. And now they don't have to pay Nick Ehlers the big contract that they don't want to pay him in this fake scenario that they don't want to pay him. In real life, they may want to pay him and just re-sign him. But in this scenario where they're like, okay, he's a UFA, let's try and get something before it's too late. Let's lock up a $6 million center for the rest of this season and through next season. As the cap goes up, that's going to look pretty next year. Let's move Nick Ehlers, who we weren't going to bring back next year, and then we'll reallocate that money in the offseason to something else that we would have saved on the contract extension for Ehlers. And then you get Malkin. You get Yevgeny Malkin on this team that's already really good. So 1-for-1 blockbuster deal, Nick Ehlers for Malkin. That's the last trade. Let me know your blockbuster fake trades in the YouTube comments. If you want to put those there, if you have any in your mind, any ideas, let me know. I think those would be fun to read. And let me know what you think about these, how ridiculous they are, or if you think there's any real possibility that any of these could go down. That is it for me tonight. Thank you for being here. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you chose to be listening or watching, and I appreciate you for that. Don't forget to hit like. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Good night from Toronto.
That's how it's done.
The Jesse Blake Sports Report with Jesse Blake.
Jesse Blake, the guy that likes to hear his name twice in one sentence. Sure, I know him. No, he doesn't have an ego at all.